My coworker adopted a kid from the Ukraine a couple of years ago. Now she's going around work asking us to adopt him and writing about giving him away on Facebook. My coworker, Mary, is a little odd. I mean, she and her husband have a ton of adopted kids, like 8 of them. And they're really religious. It's not my business, though. Everyone is different, right? Mary is also one of those people who loves to tell everyone all about what's going on in her life. So when she decided to adopt a kid from Ukraine, the whole office knew about it. She told everyone that she picked an older kid because it was easier for her and her husband. She just couldn't keep her mouth shut, even though, looking back, it's probably a good thing she did. That was about 2 years ago, and things were okay, I guess. You know how it is, everyone just tries to avoid conflict. Mary's asked me to watch her son, Tony, a few times, and I don't mind. Actually, I kind of like kids. I always try to be helpful when I can. Tony always seems to like spending time at our place, too, even though it's a pretty small apartment. It's clean, though, and everything is always organized. I like my space. Mary's house, on the other hand, is a complete mess. It's really kind of gross, to be honest. Mary's always complaining about Tony, and I'm starting to think she's just trying to get attention. I guess I'm starting to understand why he spends so much time at our place. It's probably a break from her endless complaining. It's hard, though, because I feel bad for her. She's always had a rough time with him, and I'm not trying to judge. It's just that she talks a lot about how bad he is and how much he's ruining her life. She's always talking about how much she hates it all. It just seems like he's trying to have a good time and be a kid. Maybe that's why he's so happy when he's at our place. Maybe he just wants to have fun for a while. Lately, though, things have gotten worse. Mary's started acting really crazy. She's saying that Tony is horrible, that he's mean to her other kids, and that she wants to get rid of him. She's actually asking other people to take him. She even sent an email to everyone in our department, asking if anyone wanted to take him from her. She calls it rehoming and says it's perfectly okay. I mean, the world is full of crazy, but this is something else. Then I went on Facebook, and there were pictures of Tony on her page. It's like she's literally begging people to adopt him. She's even got her phone number posted there, like she wants everyone to call her. It's really upsetting. I'm so mad, but I can't really talk to Mary about it without her getting all defensive. It's like I can't say anything without her blowing up at me. I couldn't just sit there and let her do this, though. I needed to do something. Something had to change. I called the police. They seemed confused, and they kept asking me questions. I really thought that they would get the hint and at least check on Tony. I thought it was weird that they seemed so hesitant. It's not like they hadn't dealt with this kind of thing before. But after a while, they finally agreed to check on Tony. I also called Child Protective Services, CPS. They seemed a lot more serious about the whole thing. They wanted to get all the information I had about Tony, how Mary got him, and the adoption papers. I called the police again a few hours later because I started getting really worried about Tony. The police had acted like it was no big deal, but they had said they'd at least check on Tony. I wasn't sure if he was okay. I was worried he was in danger. I knew that if I called the police back they'd just give me the runaround, so I really didn't want to, but I was desperate. Finally, they told me that CPS had gone to Mary's house, and that Mary had been talking to someone about taking Tony the next day. It really makes me angry, and makes my stomach hurt just thinking about it. They told me the worst part. The whole adoption was completely illegal. Mary and her husband got Tony from another state and didn't even bother to do things correctly. They never even tried to get the papers done right. You had to get permission from a judge, but they skipped that step completely. They told me that CPS had taken all of the children. It seems they're safe. It felt like such a huge weight had been lifted. It made me think of all those kids I've seen in movies, and how everyone wants to adopt them. It makes me wonder if all those families are real. Of course, though, my heart broke for Tony and the other kids, and I can't imagine what was happening over at Mary's house to make CPS take the kids away. It was awful, but I was so relieved they were safe, away from Mary. It was such a huge relief to know that they were in safe places, even though it made me sad to think of all the kids stuck in these terrible situations. It made me realize that there are really good people in the world who are willing to help kids in need. I also called the FBI and the Ukrainian embassy. I wanted to make sure they were aware of what was going on because I was worried that Mary might try to do this to another kid. It really makes me sick to my stomach just thinking about what she's done. I couldn't bear to think about it happening to another child. The next morning, I had to print out emails for the police because they needed proof of what Mary had done. My company is pretty small, and everyone heard what happened. Big Ange, the owner, was furious with Mary for how she treated Tony. Big Ange has 6 kids of her own, so she knows all about what it means to care for children. It must have been really hard for her to see what Mary was doing. Watching Mary walk into work that morning was pretty hard to take. She had the audacity to come in, acting like nothing had happened. She told Big Ange that CPS took her children unfairly and that it was just some big misunderstanding. She wanted to take time off from work to clear her name and to get her family back. It's amazing how Mary doesn't see the error of her ways, but Big Ange is not stupid. I'm sure she saw through that. I'm glad Big Ange isn't someone who's afraid to speak up for what's right. It wasn't easy for her. I'm sure she felt a lot of emotions, but she didn't hesitate. She ripped into Mary, calling her out for hurting those children and for being lucky she had a job at all. Mary was fired on the spot. I doubt she'll be able to collect unemployment either because she lied to Big Ange about the whole thing. It was great to see that Big Ange wasn't afraid to stand up for those kids and do the right thing, even though it might have been hard for her. Sometimes, it's so easy to just look the other way when things get tough, but I think it takes a really brave person to do what's right, even when it's hard. I don't know what the future holds for Tony and the other kids, but I'm going to try and do what I can to help. I'm not sure if I can adopt him myself, but I'm going to do everything I can to make sure he gets a safe and loving home. I know I won't ever forget what Mary did to Tony, how hard it was to make sure he was safe. It's tough to think about all that, and it makes me really mad, but it also reminds me that there are really great people in the world. It reminds me that sometimes good things happen because people decide to do the right thing. Next story. The guy I'm dating and his friends gatekeeped me about my hobbies and career. I'm feeling embarrassed. My boyfriend, Dan, and I had been dating for 3 months when he asked if I wanted to meet some of his friends for dinner. At first, I was excited. I figured it would be fun to get to know his crew. He suggested we go to a place called Hooters, which was pretty close to their workplaces, he said. I knew it was famous for its wings and, well, it's pretty well known for something else, too, which made me think it might not be my kind of place. Dan was a bit nervous before we went. He made a joke, half joking, that his friends, who were all guys, wouldn't believe that he was dating a hot girl who liked the same stuff they did. He was talking about some of the things we like to do together. They're kind of geeky things. The kind of hobbies that most people associate with guys, like building model spaceships or playing board games. I laughed it off, but it kinda felt rude to me. He said it was just a joke, but his friends definitely made me think otherwise when we got there. We went to this Hooters, and as soon as we walked in, Dan and his friends were talking about the waitresses, laughing and making jokes about their appearance. I wasn't really comfortable with that, but I didn't say anything. I mean, maybe it's normal guy behavior or something, but it just made me feel awkward. Later, they started asking me questions about all the things we like to do together. They're all into the same geeky stuff, which made sense since they were friends. I think they were trying to see how much I knew about these things. But they weren't really trying to learn about my interests. They kept asking me really obscure facts, like how many lights were in the sky before the first star was ever invented, or what kind of metal the Eiffel Tower was made out of. It was like a weird test, and I started to feel really bad about myself. I work as a junior automation engineer at a tech company, but I'm still pretty new at it. It's been really exciting learning about how code works, but I'm definitely still in the learning phase. I'm on smaller projects right now and I'm always getting help from my boss, who is really good at what she does. All of Dan's friends were senior programmers, basically the superstars of programming. I thought it was a bit strange when they started asking me questions about my job, too. I was hoping to meet some experienced programmers who could maybe teach me things, but they didn't really seem to care about teaching me. Instead, they asked about really tough programming problems, questions that I just didn't know how to answer. They'd all laugh and say, "Oh, just kidding," but it really didn't feel funny to me. I felt super nervous and awkward. It was like I was taking a pop quiz. And I'm not a great test taker. I started to feel really uncomfortable and I stopped trying to smile. I just wanted it to be over. I guess they could tell something was wrong, because one of his friends just sat there looking at his phone for the rest of the night. I don't even remember what he looked like. If they weren't quizzing me, they'd ignore me and talk among themselves, and then they'd all just kind of look over at me, like they remembered I was there. But they'd cut me off as soon as I tried to join the conversation. They'd even nod at me to acknowledge that I was trying to say something, but then they'd look away at someone else. It was kind of weird. It's not like they were that much older than me. I'm 25, Dan's 29, and his friends are in their early 30s. I was actually hoping that they could help me learn some new programming stuff, since they're so good at it. But they seemed more interested in putting me on the spot than they were in being friendly. One of them even asked me to write him a program, like I was some kind of computer whiz. And again, they all kept laughing and saying, "Just kidding," but it really didn't feel funny to me. It felt embarrassing, and Dan just sat there and let it happen. It's like he was happy that his friends were putting me on the spot. It was really weird, like he was trying to make me impress his friends by proving I knew how to do these things. He kept saying stuff like, "You know this one," or, "Come on, you can do it." We talked about this last week. He was acting like I was being tested and that I should be able to pass. He even said to one of his buddies, "See? She's really smart, too." By the end of the night, I was so annoyed. I'm not a robot, I have feelings. It's not fun being treated like some kind of brain game. I don't need to prove anything to anyone. I felt really bad about myself, and I was really disappointed in Dan for not stepping up for me. He was actually upset with me for not acting like a good sport. He told me I was having a bad attitude, and said I was immature for being upset. He kept going on about how I was sighing a lot and looking annoyed. He didn't even see that I was feeling uncomfortable. I'm glad I wasn't acting fake happy. I don't need to fake anything for anyone. I don't think I can be with Dan anymore. I don't know how I didn't see this side of him before. I'm not even sure how he expected me to enjoy that night. He knew that those questions were designed to make me feel stupid, and it wasn't fair to me. It's been one night since the dinner and I haven't answered any of his texts. I know ghosting is wrong, but I just can't deal with the thought of seeing him or talking to him right now. He acted like I was some kind of prize he needed to brag about to his friends. It just feels awful. I hope I'll feel better in a few days. Maybe I'm overreacting, but I don't want to be treated like that. I want to be with someone who respects me and wants to listen to me, someone who sees me as a real person and not just as a test subject or a trophy to impress his buddies.